On a sunny afternoon in the bustling heart of downtown, Agent Naomi Carter stepped out of a coffee shop with a warm cup in hand. She was dressed casually, jeans, sneakers, and a light jacket that concealed the badge clipped to her belt. Naomi was on her lunch break, enjoying a rare moment of peace amidst her demanding job as an FBI agent. She smiled politely at strangers as she strolled down the street, blending seamlessly into the diverse crowd. Officer Greg Stanton, a patrol cop with a reputation for being overly strict, watched her from across the street. Something about Naomi caught his attention. She didn't look like the typical professionals he expected to see in this affluent area, and his prejudices filled the gaps in his knowledge. Without hesitation, he crossed the street toward her, his expression stern and his tone sharp. "Excuse me, ma'am," Stanton called out, stepping into Naomi's path. She stopped, her expression calm but curious. "May I see some ID?" Naomi tilted her head slightly, surprised by the sudden request. "ID? May I ask why?" she replied, her voice even. She had dealt with similar situations before and knew better than to react emotionally. "You're acting suspicious," Stanton said, his words loud enough for a few nearby pedestrians to glance their way. "This isn't exactly a neighborhood you'd just wander into without a reason." Naomi raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor intact. "Suspicious how?" she asked. "I'm walking down the street with a coffee." Stanton's tone grew firmer, his posture more intimidating. "Just show me your ID, ma'am. Don't make this difficult." Naomi sighed quietly and reached for her pocket. "I'm not trying to make anything difficult, officer, but I'd like to know what I've done to warrant this level of attention." As she retrieved her wallet, more people began to notice the interaction. Stanton's raised voice and assertive stance gave the impression that Naomi was guilty of something. A few passers-by slowed down, curious about what was happening. "Let's not play games here," Stanton said. "Hand over your ID now, or I'll have to take further action." Naomi handed him her ID, still maintaining her composure. Stanton glanced at it briefly but didn't seem satisfied. "What are you doing in this area? You don't look like you belong here." At this point, the crowd began murmuring. Some people started recording the scene on their phones. Naomi noticed but remained calm, knowing this was escalating quickly. She decided not to reveal her position just yet, wanting to see how far Stanton would take things. "Officer," Naomi said firmly but politely, "I don't think you've provided me with a valid reason for stopping me. Is there something specific you're accusing me of?" Stanton crossed his arms, his frustration apparent. "Don't get smart with me. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way." Naomi glanced around at the growing crowd and took a deep breath. She wasn't about to let this situation get out of hand. With a calm but authoritative tone, she said, "Perhaps you should take another look at my ID, officer." Stanton hesitated but looked again. His expression faltered for a split second before returning to one of defiance. He still didn't realize who he was dealing with, but Naomi knew it wouldn't take long. She braced herself for what was about to unfold. Naomi stood her ground as Stanton continued his heavy-handed questioning. The crowd around them grew larger, with many onlookers holding up their phones, capturing every moment. Naomi wasn't rattled, but she was keenly aware of how quickly the situation could escalate. The officer's voice was tense, almost confrontational, as he continued to demand answers. "Are you refusing to cooperate, ma'am?" Stanton asked, his hand inching toward his belt as though ready to escalate. Naomi calmly replied, "Officer, I've given you my ID. You haven't told me what crime you suspect me of committing. What exactly do you want from me?" Her tone, calm yet authoritative, seemed to irritate Stanton further. "Don't get clever with me," he snapped. "You're in an area where you don't belong, and I need to know why." The words hit hard, and several people in the crowd gasped. Naomi saw their reactions and decided it was time to draw the line. "Officer," she said, her voice steady but louder this time so the crowd could hear. "You're making assumptions about me based on nothing but your biases. That's not how the law works. Stanton's face flushed. He was clearly unused to being challenged, especially not by someone as composed as Naomi. "I'm doing my job," he barked. "You're the one being uncooperative." Naomi took a slow step forward, her eyes locked on his. "Your job, officer, is to serve and protect. Harassing innocent people because of how they look isn't part of that job." Stanton was visibly taken aback, but he didn't back down. Instead, he reached for his radio, as if calling for backup might help him save face. "We'll see how uncooperative you are when backup gets here." Naomi exhaled and reached into her jacket pocket, pulling out her badge. She held it up for everyone to see. The FBI emblem gleamed under the sunlight, and a collective murmur spread through the crowd. "I'm Agent Naomi Carter," she said clearly, addressing not just Stanton, but everyone watching. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. And you, Officer Stanton, are dangerously close to violating my rights." The change in Stanton's demeanor was immediate. His eyes widened as he stared at the badge, and his hand froze mid-reach for the radio. He looked from Naomi to the crowd, realizing the gravity of his mistake. "You're FBI," he stammered, his tone suddenly shifting to one of disbelief. "Yes," Naomi replied, her voice sharp and firm. "And your behavior today has been entirely unprofessional. You've overstepped your authority, and now you're going to be held accountable." The crowd erupted in whispers and hushed conversations. Many began to cheer and applaud Naomi for standing up to Stanton. The officer looked around, clearly overwhelmed by the growing attention. Naomi stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You assumed the worst about me without cause. That's not just poor judgment. It's dangerous. This kind of behavior needs to stop." Stanton swallowed hard, visibly shaken. He opened his mouth to speak, but Naomi cut him off. "Save it," she said. "We'll discuss this further, but not here. I'll be reporting this incident to your superiors." The crowd cheered louder as Naomi turned to leave, her calm demeanor intact. Behind her, Stanton stood frozen, his authority shattered. This was far from over, and Naomi knew the real consequences would come next. Stanton's face burned with embarrassment as the realization of Naomi's authority sank in. The crowd's murmurs didn't help his predicament, and he struggled to regain control of the situation. Naomi, meanwhile, had no intention of letting the incident slide. She turned back toward the officer, her calm demeanor masking the determination burning inside her. "Officer Stanton," she began, her voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. "Do you understand the severity of your actions today? You've not only embarrassed yourself, but also tarnished the reputation of your department." Stanton's mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. He was stuck between his bruised ego and the fear of further consequences. A fellow officer, clearly more composed, stepped forward. "Agent Carter," the second officer said, addressing Naomi with respect, "let's take this discussion away from the public eye." Naomi nodded. That would be wise. She glanced at Stanton one last time before stepping aside with the other officer. The crowd, however, wasn't dispersing. Phones were still recording, and whispers of admiration for Naomi's courage filled the air. As they moved to a quieter corner near the restaurant's entrance, the second officer lowered his voice. "Ma'am, on behalf of the department, I apologize for this incident. This isn't how we're trained to handle situations." Naomi's sharp gaze softened slightly, but she remained firm. "An apology doesn't erase what happened. This is a systemic issue. Officers like Stanton need to be held accountable, or these situations will continue." The officer nodded, clearly understanding the weight of her words. "I agree, ma'am. This will be reported to our internal affairs team." Before Naomi could respond, Stanton approached, still visibly shaken. "Agent Carter," he said, his tone now subdued. I didn't know who you were. I made a mistake." Naomi turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "The issue, Officer Stanton, isn't that you didn't know who I was. It's that you assumed I was a threat without any evidence. That's the root of the problem." Stanton shifted uncomfortably, But Naomi didn't let up. Do you understand how dangerous that assumption could have been? What if I hadn't been in a position to defend myself? What if someone else in my place had faced the same treatment but without the resources I have? The officer nodded, his face pale. I understand. I was wrong. Naomi studied him for a moment before speaking again. Acknowledging your mistake is a start, but it's not enough. Change needs to happen, not just with you, but across the board. Stanton looked down, unable to meet her gaze. The second officer interjected, Agent Carter, I'll personally ensure that a thorough investigation is conducted. Officer Stanton will be required to attend additional training, and this incident will be documented. Naomi nodded. Good. I'll also be submitting my report to ensure accountability. With that, she turned and walked back toward the crowd, who erupted in applause as she exited the restaurant. She paused briefly to address them. Thank you for standing by and recording this. Accountability starts with all of us. The crowd cheered louder, inspired by her courage and poise. Naomi's message was clear. She wasn't just standing up for herself, but for everyone who had ever faced injustice. As she walked away, Stanton watched, knowing his actions had not only been exposed, but would now serve as a lesson for the future. Naomi stepped out of the restaurant, her mind racing. The confrontation with Officer Stanton had left an impression, but she wasn't finished yet. She pulled out her phone, dialing a number with purpose. The line connected quickly. Director Willis, she said firmly. It's Agent Naomi Carter. I need to report an incident. The FBI director's voice was calm but attentive. Go ahead, Agent Carter. Naomi detailed the events that had unfolded, sparing no detail about Officer Stanton's behavior and the bias she had experienced. The director listened carefully, his occasional affirmations letting her know he understood the gravity of the situation. This is unacceptable, Director Willis finally said. We'll escalate this matter with the local precinct. No officer should act on assumptions, especially when those assumptions are rooted in prejudice. Naomi nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I'll also be filing a report through official channels. This isn't just about me. It's about ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else. Good, the director replied. You have my full support. Keep me updated. Ending the call, Naomi felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew change wouldn't come overnight, but she was committed to being part of the solution. As she returned to the restaurant's entrance, the crowd outside parted, their eyes filled with admiration and curiosity. A young woman approached, her phone still in hand. Excuse me, Agent Carter, she said timidly. I recorded everything. If you need the video, I'd be happy to share it. Naomi smiled warmly. Thank you. That could be very helpful. She exchanged contact information with the woman, grateful for the support. The videos circulating online would ensure transparency, but having direct access to the footage was crucial for her report. As Naomi prepared to leave, a man in his late 40s approached her. He introduced himself as the restaurant owner. Agent Carter, I want to apologize for what happened in my establishment. I assure you, we don't condone that kind of behavior. Naomi appreciated the gesture. Thank you. I understand this wasn't your fault, but it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in challenging these biases. The owner nodded, looking visibly shaken. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Naomi's calm but powerful demeanor had left an impact on everyone present. As she walked to her car, she noticed Stanton standing by his squad vehicle, talking to his partner. He glanced at her, his expression a mix of shame and reflection. She didn't approach him again, knowing her earlier words had already struck a chord. Driving away, Naomi replayed the events in her mind. She had faced countless challenges in her career, but this one felt personal. It was a stark reminder of why she had chosen this path, to confront injustice head-on and make a difference. Later that evening, Naomi sat at her desk, drafting her report. She included every detail, from the initial confrontation to the officer's eventual apology. Her goal was clear: to turn this incident into an opportunity for growth and accountability. As she finished, she leaned back in her chair, her resolve stronger than ever. This wasn't just about one officer's mistake. It was about setting a precedent, ensuring that no one else would have to face what she had endured. Naomi knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to walk it. Naomi spent the next morning finalizing her report. She meticulously documented every aspect of the incident, knowing how crucial details could be in pushing for systemic change. Her focus was unwavering as she typed, reviewing the videos shared by witnesses to corroborate her account. The more she watched, the more she realized how powerful the footage could be in highlighting the biases that permeated law enforcement. By mid-morning, Naomi submitted her report to both the FBI and the city's Civilian Review Board. She knew the process would take time, but her goal was to ensure accountability and spark a broader conversation about equity and professionalism in law enforcement. Naomi had faced challenges before, but this one felt different. It felt like a call to action. Later that day, Naomi received a call from Director Willis. "Naomi," he began, his tone steady, "your report has caused quite a stir. The local precinct has been notified, and the officer in question is under review. The footage and eyewitness accounts you provided are compelling." "That's good to hear, Director," Naomi replied. "This isn't just about one officer. It's about addressing a pattern that affects so many people." "You're absolutely right," the director agreed. "And because of your composure and professionalism, this incident is becoming a catalyst for change." Naomi hung up, feeling a mix of satisfaction and determination. But the day wasn't over yet. A local news station had reached out, requesting an interview about the incident. Naomi hesitated. She wasn't one for the spotlight, but she understood the importance of using her voice to amplify the message. When she arrived at the studio, the host greeted her warmly. "Agent Carter, thank you for joining us. Your story has captured the attention of the entire city." Naomi nodded. "Thank you for having me. I hope this conversation encourages people to reflect on their own biases and take action to address them." During the interview, Naomi recounted the events with clarity and grace. She emphasized the importance of accountability and the role that both law enforcement and the community play in fostering trust. Her words resonated with viewers, sparking a wave of support on social media. Hashtags calling for justice and reform began trending, and people shared their own stories of bias and resilience. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Officer Stanton was facing the consequences of his actions. The footage had reached his superiors, and they couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. Stanton was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and mandatory bias training was rolled out for the entire precinct. As the days passed, Naomi noticed a shift in the public discourse. The incident had ignited a broader conversation about equity and professionalism in law enforcement. Community leaders, activists, and even officers themselves began engaging in dialogues about accountability and reform. Naomi was invited to speak at a community forum, where she shared her experiences and listened to others who had faced similar challenges. At the forum, a young man stood up and said, "Your story gave me the courage to speak up about what I've experienced. Thank you for being a voice for so many of us." Naomi's heart swelled with emotion. She realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about empowering others to demand the respect and dignity they deserved. As she left the forum, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the start of something bigger, and she was ready to see it through. The community forum became a pivotal moment for Naomi. The stories she heard from others left a deep impression on her. People from different walks of life shared their encounters with bias, unfair treatment, and moments of resilience. Each voice added weight to the urgency of change, and Naomi found herself inspired by their courage. As the evening progressed, Naomi was approached by a young woman named Tasha. She was a high school senior with dreams of becoming a lawyer. Tasha looked up to Naomi and said, "I want to make a difference, just like you. Seeing someone like you stand up for what's right makes me believe I can too." Naomi smiled warmly. "Tasha, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. The key is to never let anyone's prejudice define your worth. Use your voice, your skills, and your determination to make the world better." The forum ended on a hopeful note, with attendees pledging to continue the conversations within their communities. Naomi left feeling a renewed sense of responsibility. Her actions had inspired others, but she knew this was only the beginning. The next day, Naomi received an unexpected invitation. The mayor's office wanted her to attend a city council meeting to discuss law enforcement reform. It was an opportunity to advocate for meaningful change, and Naomi didn't hesitate to accept. She spent hours preparing, gathering data and testimonies to support her case. At the meeting, Naomi presented her points with poise and conviction. She highlighted the importance of bias training, community engagement, and accountability within law enforcement. Her words were met with nods of agreement from the council members, and even the police chiefs seemed receptive. One council member spoke up. "Agent Carter, your courage and professionalism have shed light on issues we can no longer ignore. I propose we form a task force to address these concerns and implement reforms." The proposal was met with unanimous support, and Naomi was asked to join the task force as an advisor. It was a significant step forward, and she felt proud to be part of the solution. Meanwhile, news of the incident and Naomi's efforts continued to spread. Media outlets covered the story extensively, and public support for reform grew stronger. Social media was flooded with messages of encouragement, with many praising Naomi for her composure and determination. Officer Stanton's investigation also reached its conclusion. The review board found his actions to be in violation of department policies, and he faced disciplinary measures, including mandatory training and a suspension. The department issued a public apology, acknowledging the need for change and committing to rebuilding trust with the community. Naomi's work didn't stop there. She collaborated with community leaders, educators, and law enforcement to create programs aimed at fostering understanding and mutual respect. Workshops, town halls, and mentorship initiatives were launched, with Naomi often serving as a speaker or facilitator. Through it all, Naomi remained grounded. She continued her work with the FBI, balancing her responsibilities with her advocacy efforts. She knew the path to lasting change would be long and challenging, but she was committed to seeing it through. As the weeks turned into months, Naomi reflected on how a single incident had sparked a movement. She had turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity for growth, proving that resilience and courage could pave the way for a brighter future. And as she looked at the faces of those she had inspired, Naomi knew her journey was far from over. The City Council's decision to form a task force marked the beginning of a transformative journey for Naomi and the community. With her appointment as an advisor, Naomi embraced the role with determination, knowing that real change required consistent effort and collaboration. The first task force meeting brought together people from all walks of life: community leaders, law enforcement officers, educators, and activists. Naomi began by sharing her vision. "We're here to build bridges, not walls. Our goal is to ensure that every individual in this city feels safe, valued, and respected. Let's focus on solutions, not blame." The room buzzed with energy as ideas began to flow. Some suggested mandatory bias training for officers, while others proposed community outreach programs to foster better relationships between residents and the police. Naomi listened attentively, taking notes and encouraging everyone to contribute. One of the officers on the task force, Sergeant Lopes, spoke up. "As someone who's been on the force for years, I can tell you that many of us want to do better. But sometimes we don't have the tools or training to handle situations properly. I believe this task force can change that." Naomi nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Sergeant Lopes. Change starts with acknowledging the problem, and you've just taken the first step." Over the next few weeks, the task force rolled out several initiatives. One of the most impactful was a mentorship program that paired officers with local youth. The goal was to break down stereotypes and create positive interactions. Naomi personally mentored Tasha, the aspiring lawyer she had met at the community forum. They often met after school to discuss career goals, challenges, and how to navigate a world that sometimes seemed stacked against them. Meanwhile, Naomi continued her work with the FBI, balancing her professional responsibilities with her advocacy efforts. Her story had become a symbol of resilience and hope, inspiring others to take action in their own communities. Messages poured in from across the country, letters, emails, and social media posts from people who had been moved by her courage. One day, Naomi received a call from the police chief. "Agent Carter, I want to thank you. The changes we're making wouldn't have been possible without your leadership. I've seen a shift in morale among the officers, and it's because of the example you've set." Naomi was humbled by the chief's words. "Thank you, Chief, but this is a team effort. Everyone here has played a part in making this happen." As months passed, the city began to see tangible results. Complaints against officers decreased, and community trust in law enforcement grew. The mentorship program flourished, with many young people expressing newfound respect for the police and vice versa. Naomi felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her efforts were making a difference. One evening, Naomi attended a community celebration to honor the task force's achievements. As she stood on the stage, looking out at the diverse crowd, she felt a wave of gratitude. "This is what progress looks like," she said, her voice steady. "We've proven that when we come together, we can create a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Let's continue this journey, hand in hand." The crowd erupted into applause, and Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but she was ready to face them. Because in the end, it wasn't just about justice, it was about building a better world for everyone. And that, she believed, was a mission worth dedicating her life to.